The wedding clay dragon broke its own wings in Lady Merixa Sol's hands. One moment, it rested on the black altar before the dragon court, glazed in ceremonial gold, its small horned head lifted toward Dragon King Orvian Kade's marriage flame. The next, both wings snapped backward with a sound too sharp for clay. Cold ash poured from its mouth. Not warm ash, not kiln ash. Cold ash, grey-white and lifeless, spilling over Merixa's jeweled fingers and across the altar silk like the remains of a fire that had never known heat. The court went silent. Merixa did not drop the dragon. That was the first proof of her training. She held the broken figure with both hands, chin lifted, beauty still arranged across her face, though ash streaked the rubies at her wrists. Narella Cind stood 3 steps below the altar, wearing a soot-dark work dress and a leather apron the court had insisted was unfit for a wedding hall. No one looked at her until the second clay dragon broke. It sat beside the first on a silver tray carried by a young priest. This one had not touched Merixa's hands. It had not touched the altar flame. Yet its wings split at the joints and fell onto the tray. Cold ash seeped from the cracks along its ribs. Then the third, then the fourth. Across the wedding hall, every ritual clay dragon made for Orvian's marriage rite broke its wings and turned its blind clay face toward the east arch, where the old passage led down to Kade ashworks. Toward Narella's kiln, a murmur ran through the nobles. The Kyline woman, the ash servant, she was removed this morning. Perhaps she fired them badly. Narella kept her hands at her sides. They were not beautiful hands. Clay had made the skin dry. Kiln heat had left old red marks around her knuckles. Her thumb carried the flattened scar of years, pressing heat into dragon bond cups, altar beasts, funeral wings, and marriage figures the court praised while forgetting who shaped them. Merixa turned slowly. "Narella," she said, soft enough to sound wounded. "Did you tamper with the wedding dragons because His Majesty entrusted the kiln to me?" There it was. Not accusation first. Injury. The court loved injured beauty. It knew what to do with it. Narella looked at the broken dragon in Merixa's hands. "I did not make that one." A ripple moved through the hall. Merixa's face sharpened by less than a breath. "Of course not. I shaped the final wedding dragon myself, as tradition allows the future queen to bless her union." "No," Narella said. "Tradition allows the bride to warm the last figure, not shape it, not fire it, not seal it." A nobleman near the altar gave an irritated sigh. "It is clay." Narella turned her head. The words had struck the old wound more cleanly than Merixa's smile. "It is clay. It is servant work. It is something bought, carried, polished, and placed under royal fire by people who never learned that sacred clay remembered touch more honestly than court witnesses did. The Heatprint Kiln did not remember spoken vows. It remembered the warmth of the hands that had saved dragon bonds from breaking. A wedding dragon did not bless a marriage by beauty. It sealed whether the hands joining the bond had carried true heat, stolen heat, or dead ash. Narella had learned that rule before she had learned her letters. Her mother had pressed her small palm against unfired clay and said, "If your hand lies, the kiln will cool. If your hand carries care, the clay will hold heat after flame leaves it." No court lord had ever asked the rule. They only asked whether the dragons looked beautiful enough. Orvian Kade stood before the marriage flame in black ceremonial armor, the fire behind him low and red. He was a dangerous king, hard-boned and ember-eyed, with a dragon shadow folded against the wall behind him like a beast pretending not to bleed. His gaze moved from Merixa's ash-covered hands to Narella, then to the broken wings. He recognized something. Not enough, but something. "This figure was not from Narella's firing," he said. Merixa lowered her lashes. "Majesty, she would say that. The clay color is wrong." Narella looked at him then. For one cruel second, hope stirred. He had noticed. Of all people in the hall, he had noticed. Then Orvian's eyes hardened in the way kings' eyes did when court pressure stood too close to truth. But the kiln belongs to Kade Ashworks, he said. If the firing failed, the fault remains with its keeper. Narella felt the sentence enter her chest like a kiln door closing. Its keeper, not its maker, not its heat-bearer, not the woman whose hands had carried warmth into his dragon bond after the siege of Riss, when he could not swallow broth and his dragon shadow had trembled under his skin like something dying. Just keeper, as if the kiln were a palace table, as if sacred craft were a room that could be handed to whoever wore bridal jewels. Merixa stepped down from the altar, still holding the broken dragon, cold ash spilled at her feet. His Majesty has been generous. You were not cast out, Narella. You were relieved. There is honor in letting higher hands finish a royal rite. Higher hands. The court's eyes dropped to Narella's clay-stained fingers. Her face did not change. She had survived worse than nobles discovering a clean way to call her low. The kiln will not heat for hands that stole the Maker's name, she said. Merixa smiled. There, superstition, exactly as I warned. Orvian's jaw tightened. Narella. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The old instinct in her almost answered. Years of bringing cups to war rooms, heat-sealed bowls to sickbeds, bond clay to lower chambers. Years of being summoned when a dragon bond cracked and dismissed when the king stood straight again. She made herself remain still. Do not call me to repair what you let be taken from me, she said. The marriage flame behind Orvian bent sideways. His dragon shadow lifted its head. Merixa's fingers tightened around the broken clay dragon. Majesty, this is public defiance during your wedding rite. No, Narella said. This is public consequence. She stepped toward the altar. The court parted reluctantly. Even then, no one wanted ash on their sleeves. Narella held out one hand. Give it to me. Merixa looked to Orvian. Orvian did not move. That was answer enough. Merixa placed the broken dragon into Narella's palm as if handing refused to a servant. The moment Narella's thumb touched the cracked chest, red gold heat returned through the clay. Not flame. Heat. Living warmth moved from the mark of her thumb into the dragon's broken ribs. The cold ash stopped pouring. The snapped wings trembled on the altar silk. One broken wing lifted half an inch, not mended, only remembering where it had once belonged. The hall forgot to breathe. Orvian stared at Narella's thumbprint glowing in the clay. His face changed. Narella saw the memory strike him. A clay cup after battle. His own shaking hands too weak to hold it. Her thumbprint pressed near the rim to keep the broth warm when no fire could be brought near his dragon fever. He had drunk from that mark for 3 nights and lived. Now the same heat print glowed in the broken wedding dragon. Narella, he said again, but this time the name was not command. It was recognition. She closed her fingers around the broken clay before recognition could pretend to be apology. Memory is not apology, she said. Below the altar, every broken clay dragon turned its face toward her. Then the Heatprint Kiln roared from the depths of Kade Ashworks, though no fire had been lit inside it. If the bond was sealed with cold ash, Orvian's dragon shadow would not join his bride. It would crack from him. Cold ash blew through the wedding hall doors and wrote one line across the black altar. The maker was removed before the dragon bond was sealed. The marriage flame did not go out. It went cold. The red fire behind Dragon King Orvian Kade bent inward until its center turned pale gray, then white, then the color of bone left in winter ash. No smoke rose from it, no heat touched the altar. Yet the silver marriage bowl frosted along its rim, and the black silk beneath the broken clay dragons stiffened as if the wedding hall had been buried under snow. Orvian's dragon shadow jerked against the wall. The beast-shaped darkness behind him had been folded tight since the ceremony began, wings pressed close, horned head lowered in royal restraint. Now one wing cracked from shoulder to tip, a thin white line splitting through the shadow like dry clay under pressure. Orvian went still. Narella saw it before the court did. Of course she did. She had watched that shadow tremble after the siege of Riss. She had carried heatprint cups to his chamber when every brazier worsened his fever. She had shaped small clay scales for his dragon bond, pressed warmth into them with her thumb, and left before dawn so the court could praise royal healers for a survival her hands had kept warm. Merixa Sol lifted the broken wedding dragon higher. Cold ash slid down her wrists. "You see what she has done," she said. "She made the clay turn against the marriage flame." Narella did not answer quickly. Fast answers pleased courts. Careful ones saved work. The flame is cold because the bond clay was sealed wrong. Merixa's eyes sharpened. "By you." "No, by whoever fired dead heat under a stolen maker's name." The wedding hall stirred. Orvian turned toward her. His jaw was tight now, not with anger alone. Pain had entered him through the dragon shadow. "Can it be repaired?" The old phrasing almost made Narella laugh. It was always, "Can it be repaired?" after something sacred was taken apart by hands that wanted credit before they wanted understanding. She looked past him toward the east arch, where cold ash still drifted from the passage to Kade ashworks. "The kiln will decide what may be repaired." Orvian's voice hardened by instinct. "Bring her to the ashworks." The broken clay dragons moved. Not much. Only enough for every blind clay face to turn toward the king. Then the cold ash across the altar lifted in a thin gray spiral and crossed the floor between Orvian and Narella. It formed a line no guards stepped over. Narella looked at it. So did Orvian. The Heatprint Kiln had answered. Not with fire, with refusal. Narella's voice was quiet. "It will not let you summon me like a servant." The words struck him. Good. Let them. Merixa stepped close to his side, ash still coating her jeweled hands. "Majesty, this is exactly the disorder I warned you about. She has bound the kiln to her pride." "The kiln was bound to the maker's heat before your name entered the ashworks," Narella said. Merixa's mouth tightened. Orvian looked toward the east arch, then back to Narella. His dragon shadow shuddered again, and the white crack in its wing widened. This time the court saw it. Several nobles stepped back. A cracked dragon shadow before a marriage altar was not a bad omen. It was a danger. "If the bond remains cold?" Orvian asked. Narella held the broken clay dragon against her palm. Red gold heat pulsed faintly under her thumbprint. "Your dragon shadow will not join the marriage bond. It will split away from the vow. If the rite is forced, it may split from you." Silence took the whole. Merixa recovered first. "Then she must fix it now." "No," Narella said. Orvian's eyes lifted. She met them without bowing. "Return the maker's mark." Merixa gave a soft laugh. "A stamp?" "My mark," Narella said. "The bronze press taken from the ashworks this morning." Orvian looked at the nearest priest. The man lowered his eyes. Narella continued. "The firing ledger, the kiln key, and the name of whoever signed the final dragon is mine." Merixa's smile thinned. "This is extortion before the altar." "No, this is craft refusing theft." The cold marriage flame bent lower. Frost crawled along the altar stone. Orvian's dragon shadow dragged one claw down the wall, leaving a pale line behind it. Orvian turned to the priests. "Bring what she asked for." Merixa moved before they could obey. She took a small golden vial from the bridal tray and poured thick ceremonial glaze over the broken clay dragon in her hands. The glaze slid beautifully across the cracked body, hiding ash, sealing seams, making the ruined figure shine as if nothing had happened. "There," she said. "The court does not need servant drama. The wedding dragon is restored." The glazed dragon's head snapped toward her. Its mouth opened. Cold ash blasted over her bodice. At the same moment, Orvian's dragon shadow cracked again, the white line spreading from wing into chest. He staggered one step before catching himself on the altar. Narella crossed the ash line without thinking, then stopped herself before touching him. He saw that. Pain and something like shame moved through his face. "You cannot cover dead heat with gold," Narella said. "Gold remembers surface. Clay remembers hand." The priests returned carrying a bronze maker's mark, a black firing ledger, and a heavy iron key darkened by years of kiln smoke. The moment the key entered the hall, the cold ash stopped falling. Narella set the broken clay dragon on the altar and pressed her thumb beside the glazed crack. Red-gold warmth spread through only the place she touched. The gold glaze remained cold and gray around it. "See," she said, "the clay does not answer title. It does not answer bride, king, priest, or palace. It answers heatprint." She lifted the bronze maker's mark. Its face had been scraped, her name nearly gone. Only the first and last letters remained, N and D, wounded at the edges. Orvian stared at it. Who did this? The iron key warmed in Narella's hand, and the firing ledger shuddered open. Pages curled under the heat traveling through her palm. They turned past years of Narella's cramped entries, bond cup, fever scale, altar beast, funeral wing, until they reached the final wedding record. The ink was fresh. The signature was not hers, but her maker's mark had been stamped beneath it. Merixa's face did not move. That was how Narella knew. The broken clay dragon in Narella's hands warmed once, then split along the chest, revealing cold grey ash packed under a false red glaze. Across the open ledger, letters burned up through the page. The wedding dragon had been fired with a stolen maker's name. The Heatprint Kiln did not open for the king. It waited beneath Kade ashworks with its mouth sealed in black iron, breathing no flame, giving no smoke, as if every brick in its body had turned its back on the wedding hall above. By the time Orvian Kade led the court down the ash stair, his dragon shadow had cracked twice more. The white fracture now crossed one wing and ran into the beast's chest, thin and terrible, visible even against the dark walls. Each step Orvian took made the shadow drag behind him half a breath late, as if some part of it had already begun to separate. Narella saw it. She did not reach for him. That was harder than anger. The old memory of fever chambers moved inside her. Orvian unable to stand, his dragon, bond shivering under his skin, her heatprint cup warming between his hands while royal healers argued in useless whispers. She had known how to save heat then. She knew how to test dead heat now. But knowing did not make her owned. Behind them, Merixa Sol descended without haste, the broken wedding dragon carried before her by a priest. Her bridal silk had been brushed clean, but cold ash still clung beneath her rings where beauty could not quite hide what had touched it. The court entered the ashworks uneasily. They had admired the finished dragons in upper halls for years. Few had ever come below, where sacred clay was needed, dried, fired, cooled, marked, and named. The air here did not smell of perfume or altar oil. It smelled of mineral dust, old smoke, iron shelves, and the stubborn warmth left by work no one applauded. The stolen maker's mark rested in Narella's hand. The scraped bronze felt wrong. Not dead, wounded. Merixa looked at the court before she looked at Narella. "A maker's mark is a stamp," she said clearly. "A stamp can be stolen, misplaced, misused by any servant with access to a table. It proves disorder in the ashworks. It does not prove I stole heat." Several nobles shifted with relief. They preferred explanations that kept rank intact. Narella placed the damaged mark on the stone slab beside the kiln key. A stamp marks the surface. She lifted the broken clay dragon from the priest's tray. Its ruined chest still held cold grey ash beneath false glaze. Heat marks the inside. Orvian's eyes moved to her. "What do you need?" The kiln opened. A priest stepped forward quickly. "The marriage rite cannot wait through a full kiln reading. The dragon, shadow, is already unstable. Repair must begin at the altar." "No," Narella said. "The altar shows what failed. The kiln shows what was done." Merixa gave a small, sorrowful sigh. "Majesty, hear how she delays. Your bond is cracking while she protects her pride." Orvian's jaw hardened. For a moment, old command gathered in him. Then his gaze fell to the scraped bronze mark, to Narella's name almost erased, to the cracked shadow dragging behind his own feet. He turned to the court. She is maker, he said, not keeper. The ashworks went still. Narella's throat tightened before she could stop it. Not because the words healed. They did not. But because every stolen thing had a first moment when someone named it correctly again. Orvian looked back at her. Open it, if it will open for you. No apology followed. Good. An apology would have been too small for the work. Narella took the iron key in her right hand and the damaged maker's mark in her left. Then she stepped to the kiln. The black iron mouth did not move. She pressed the key into the lock. Nothing. Merixa's lips curved faintly. Narella set the scraped maker's mark against the kiln plate, aligning the wounded N and D with the soot-dark groove where her full name had rested for years. The bronze warmed. Not bright. Not dramatic. Warm enough to remember. The kiln lock turned. A breath of red-gold heat rolled over the ashworks floor, and every broken clay dragon in the room lifted its head. The court stepped back. The kiln opened for Narella Cind. Inside, no flame burned. On the lower firing shelf lay the final wedding dragon's mold, split in two. Beside it sat 3 lumps of clay, grey-black at the core, their surfaces painted red before firing to imitate living heat. Narella did not touch them yet. She used iron tongs. The first lump she placed on a plain tile. Then she pressed her thumb to a strip of fresh, unfired clay and laid it beside the lump. The fresh clay warmed red gold. True heat warms what is near it, she said. She placed the damaged maker's mark beside the second lump. A crack shot through the bronze. Stolen heat cracks what it borrows. Then she lowered the third lump into a shallow bowl of clean kiln sand. The sand vanished inward, not scattered, devoured. A hollow formed where the dead ash touched it. Narella looked up. Dead ash devours what should hold heat. Merixa's face changed only at the edges. Funeral clay, she said sharply. You kept funeral ash inside a royal marriage kiln. The court recoiled. That accusation had teeth. Funeral clay belonged to final dragon rites, not marriage rites. It carried the last cooling of a dragon bond after death. To keep it near wedding clay was sacrilege if done carelessly. Narella looked at the grey-black core inside the firing lump. This was not stored here, she said. It was fired here. Merixa seized the opening. By whom? You held the key. You kept the ledger. You have handled every funeral wing this court ever mourned. Narella did not answer her. She turned to Orvian. Give me the cup. His expression emptied. He knew which cup. The room seemed to narrow around the words. Orvian's dragon shadow lifted its cracked head, and the white line in its chest brightened with pain. No, Merixa said. Too quickly. Narella heard it. So did Orvian. The clay cup from the siege of Riss had been kept in the king's private reliquary, not because the court honored Narella's work, but because Orvian had survived with it between his hands. Narella had pressed her thumbprint near the rim so the broth would hold warmth through dragon fever. A guard brought it wrapped in black cloth. When Narella uncovered the cup, her thumbprint still glowed faintly near the rim. Then the dead ash inside the wedding clay stirred. It leaned toward the cup, hungry. Narella placed the cup beside the third lump. The cup's old warmth flickered. The dead ash drank it. A crack opened across Orvian's dragon shadow from chest to throat. The kiln breathed one line of heat across the floor. The dead heat had been taken from Orvian's first dragon bond cup. The cup cracked before anyone touched it. A thin line opened from the rim to the base, running straight through the old thumbprint Narella had pressed there after the siege of Riss. The glow beneath the mark dimmed, then flared, then dimmed again, as if the clay were trying to breathe through a wound. Orvian Kade made a sound he did not seem to choose. Not a word, not a command. The sound of a man feeling an old survival pulled open in front of strangers. His dragon shadow dragged one broken wing across the ashworks wall. The white crack in its chest brightened until every noble could see it. Not omen now. Injury. The dead heat inside the wedding clay was not merely cold. It had been cut from something that once kept Orvian's bond alive. Merixa Sol placed one hand over her heart. Cold ash still darkened the skin beneath her rings. "How convenient," she whispered. "The ash servant's private thumbprint lies on the very cup that corrupted the marriage rite." The court turned. There it was again. Not denial. Reversal. Narella looked down at the cracked cup. She had made it after 3 sleepless nights, when Orvian's fever had turned every bronze basin blue and his dragon shadow had thrashed so hard the walls of the healing chamber shook. The royal healers had feared bringing live fire near him. His bond had rejected flame, light, and metal. Clay alone had held warmth without scorching him. So she had made a cup, plain, unglazed, marked only by her thumb at the rim. No one had called it sacred then. They called it useful. She had access to the king in weakness, Merixa said, voice gaining strength. She had access to the cup. She had access to funeral clay, and now she pretends surprise when dead heat appears inside the wedding dragon. Several nobles looked relieved. A servant could be guilty. That was easier than believing a bride had used holy clay as a weapon. Orvian's eyes moved from Merixa to Narella. For one breath, old habit stood between them. Kings doubted downward. Courts made that easy. Narella saw the moment arrive. She did not plead. She picked up the cracked cup. The old heat inside it flickered against her thumb. Weak, but not gone. "If I meant to corrupt your wedding," she said, "I would not have left my own heatprint screaming inside the cup." Merixa laughed softly. "Or you believed no one would understand it but you." "No," Narella said. "I believed no one cared enough to learn." The ashworks fell quiet. That hurt the court because it was true. Narella set the cup on the testing slab. Then she took 3 strips of raw clay from the covered basin beside the kiln. She laid the first beside the cup. It warmed faintly where her thumbprint faced it. Living heat shares. She turned the cup so the cracked side faced the second strip. The clay split down the middle. Stolen heat breaks what it touches. Then she scraped a grain of gray ash from the wedding dragon's chest and dropped it onto the third strip. The strip caved inward. Dead heat consumes the memory around it. The nobles drew back from the slab. Merixa did not. Her control was too polished to retreat when she should have. Narella saw that too. Orvian's voice was low. "Can the cup show who took from it?" Narella looked at him. "Only if the one who took heat left pressure." "Pressure? Heat is not stolen by looking. It must be pressed, drawn, sealed, or copied." Merixa lifted her chin. "You invent rules as needed." Narella took the bronze maker's mark in one hand and the kiln key in the other. "No, I used the ones no one important wanted to learn." She set the key flat against the testing slab. The iron warmed, not from the kiln, from her palm. Then she placed the cracked cup over it, upside down, so the old thumbprint faced the stone. The cup trembled. Red gold light gathered around her thumbprint, struggling against a gray pull. Slowly, another mark surfaced beneath the base of the cup. Not a thumb. Not Narella's hand. A narrow ring impression, pressed deep while the clay had still held memory. The mark had a sunburst edge, elegant and sharp, shaped like the signet Merixa wore beneath her bridal glove. Merixa's hand closed. Too late. Orvian saw it. So did the court. Merixa's face remained beautiful by force alone. Many noble rings bear sunwork. Narella did not look away from the mark. "Yours bears 7 points. The clay remembers 7. Orvian turned toward Merixa. "Remove the glove." "Majestu." "Remove it." This time the command had no wedding softness left. Merixa slowly drew off the bridal glove from her right hand. Beneath it, the signet ring shone gold and ruby, 7 sun points circling the stone. The cracked cup warmed in warning. The dragon shadow behind Orvian snarled without sound. Merixa's eyes flashed. "Yes, I touched the cup. I prayed over it. I honored the relic that kept my future husband alive. Is reverence now a crime if a noble woman performs it and a servant resents the beauty of it?" The words almost worked. They were made for courts. Narella took the cup in both hands. The crack widened. Pain moved through the old heat print into her thumb, deep enough to make her breath catch. She did not hide it. Hidden pain had built this entire disaster. "You did not pray," she said. "You pressed a draw ring into living heat." Merixa's mouth tightened. Narella turned the cup toward Orvian. "The heat taken from this cup was not enough to kill your dragon bond, only enough to imitate the night it survived." Orvian went very still. A harder truth entered the ashworks. Merixa had not only wanted to marry the Dragon King, she had wanted the court to believe her hands carried the same saving warmth that Narella's had once left in his cup. She wanted a false origin, a stolen memory, a marriage bond sealed not merely to his throne, but to the story of his survival. Orvian looked at Narella, and this time guilt did not rise as regret. It rose as horror. "You saved me," he said. Narella closed her eyes for half a heartbeat, not because she wanted the words, because she hated how long she had needed them. "When your dragon bond cracked after Riss," she said, "I kept heat in the cup. That is all. That is not all. It was all anyone allowed it to be." The cracked cup pulsed in her hands. The old thumbprint brightened once. Then the dead ash inside the wedding dragon lunged toward it like hunger. Narella snapped the cup away before it could drink more. Merixa's calm broke. "Give it to me." Orvian stepped between them. At last, not close to Narella, not claiming her work, only placing his body where Merixa's reach would have to cross him first. "No," he said. The single word shook the ashworks. Merixa's eyes burned. "You would protect her accusation over your marriage? I protect the bond you tried to counterfeit." The cracked dragon shadow behind him lifted its broken wing. Narella felt the cup warm against her palm. But the heat was unstable now. The stolen drawer had opened a path between the old cup and the wedding dragon. If left unsealed, the dead ash would continue to drink until the original heatprint failed. She looked at the kiln, then at the final unfired wedding dragon still waiting on the upper shelf, untouched by glaze, pale and perfect and nameless. Merixa followed her gaze. Her expression changed. Narella understood. The unfired dragon was not backup. It was the vessel meant to receive the stolen heat after the ceremony, a clean-looking body for a dead memory. Narella stepped toward the shelf. "No one touches that clay," Merixa said. Narella picked up the iron firing mallet. The court gasped. Orvian turned. "Narella." She did not look at him. "If I let them use my heat without my name once," she said, "they will build a kingdom of borrowed warmth." Then she lifted the mallet over the final unfired dragon. The kiln exhaled red-gold heat behind her. Across the cracked cup, one sentence surfaced beneath her thumbprint. She did not steal the cup to break the bond. She stole the night Narella saved him. The firing mallet felt heavier than iron should. Narella held it above the final unfired wedding dragon and felt the entire ashworks lean toward her decision. The clay figure sat on the upper shelf, pale and perfect, its wings curved in bridal symmetry, its head lifted as if it already expected praise. It had no glaze, no ash stains, no cracks, no proof of crime on its surface. That was what made it dangerous. Court nobles loved clean surfaces. They trusted what looked untouched. They preferred crime to announce itself with soot, blood, or monstrous sound. They did not understand that the most useful theft was often made smooth enough for ceremony. Merixa Sol's voice cut through the heat. "If she breaks that dragon, she destroys the last chance to seal your marriage bond." Orvian Kade did not look at Merixa. He looked at the mallet in Narella's hand, then at the unfired dragon. His own dragon shadow dragged behind him with a crack from wing to throat, watching through pain with emberless eyes. "Narella," he said quietly, "what is inside it?" She did not lower the mallet. "The shape of a lie." A priest made a distressed sound. "That figure is unblessed. It has not yet been fired. If broken before witness, the marriage rite must be remade from the beginning." "Good," Narella said. The court recoiled as if she had struck someone. Merixa seized it. You hear her. She never intended repair. She wants the right broken because she was not allowed to stand above her station. Narella finally looked at her. No anger rushed out, only heat, slow and old. My station was below the altar, she said. Your crime was trying to make my heat kneel there too. Then she brought the mallet down. The unfired dragon shattered. Pale clay burst across the shelf and floor, not with the crisp sound of fired work, but with a soft, brutal collapse. Wings crumbled first, then the chest split open. Something inside it rang. Not clay, metal. Narella reached into the broken body and pulled out a thin gold coil no wider than a thread. It had been hidden through the hollow heart of the figure, curved in the shape of a dragon bond loop. At its center was a small, flat plate pressed with two marks. One was Narella's damaged maker's mark. The other was Merixa's 7-point sun ring. The ashworks went silent. Merixa's face hardened. A bridal binding thread, entirely lawful. Not inside unfired bond clay, Narella said. She set the gold coil on the testing slab beside the cracked cup. The old heat print on the cup flickered away from it. Narella touched the coil with the end of the iron key. The gold turned white cold. A thread of grey ash crawled out of the plate and reached toward the cup's thumbprint. Orvian saw it. So did the priests. The coil had not been made to bless a marriage. It had been made to draw. Narella stepped back before the dead ash could touch her skin. This was meant to be fired after the ceremony. Once your marriage vow opened the bond, the final dragon would have received the stolen heat from the cup. The kiln would read the heat. The court would see the glow and believe Merixa's hands had carried it, Orvian said. His voice had become very soft. The dangerous softness of a dragon king no longer asking whether betrayal existed. Merixa's shoulders straightened. I used what the court already valued. Symbol, relic, noble witness, bridal seal. If a servant's warmth was so essential, perhaps the fault lies in a kingdom that required it but never named it. For the first time, Narella heard no denial in Merixa, only contempt sharpened by truth. Merixa did not think she had stolen from Narella. She thought she had corrected the shape of power, taken what the court already used anonymously and given it a noble face. Orvian turned on her. You would let my dragon shadow crack to forge a story. I would give your court a queen whose hands could be believed, Merixa said. Do you think they would kneel to an ashworks woman? Do you think they would accept that the Dragon King survived because a Kailine woman pressed warmth into a cup? The words landed exactly where she aimed them. At the court, at Orvian, at Narella. Narella could have let them wound her. Instead, she picked up one shard of the broken, unfired dragon and held it to the cup's thumbprint. The shard warmed faintly. She held another shard to the gold coil. It cracked. She held a third over the dead grey ash that had seeped from the coil's plate. It caved inward, devoured from the center. True heat shares, she said. Stolen heat cracks. Dead ash devours. You did not make yourself believable. You made the bond hungry. Orvian's dragon shadow shuddered violently. The crack at its throat opened another inch. This time, Orvian swayed. Narella moved before pride could stop her. She caught the cracked clay cup with one hand and pressed her thumb hard over the old heat print. Red gold warmth flared between cup and king, not touching him, only steadying the air around his dragon shadow long enough for the fracture to stop spreading. The cost went through her thumb like a nail of heat. She did not cry out. Orvian did. Not loudly, but enough. Narella. Do not make my name sound like payment, she said through clenched teeth. His face went still with pain. Good. Let him understand that saving was not consent to be used again. Merixa's gaze dropped to Narella's hand on the cup, then sharpened with sudden calculation. She lunged toward the testing slab. Orvian moved first. He caught her wrist before she reached the coil. The ashworks shook. His dragon shadow, cracked though it was, unfolded behind him with one broken wing raised between Merixa and Narella. "No farther," he said. Merixa stared at his hand around her wrist. "You protect her now? I should have protected what she made before you turned it into a weapon." Narella felt the words, did not take them. She lifted the cracked cup away from the dead ash and set it inside a ring of clean kiln sand. Protection is late. Naming is first. Orvian released Merixa slowly and turned to the priests. "Then name it." The oldest priest's face had gone pale. "Majesty, say what was done." The priest looked at the broken dragon, the gold coil, the cup, the scraped maker's mark, the cracked shadow. His throat worked. "The final wedding dragon was hollowed for a draw binding," he said. "It carried a false maker's stamp and a bridal ring. Pressure. It was prepared to receive stolen heat." "From where?" Orvian asked. The priest's eyes lowered. "From the king's first dragon bond cup." "And whose heatprint preserved that cup?" No one answered. Orvian's voice cut lower. "Say her name." The priest bowed his head. "Narella Cind." The kiln breathed. Not fire. Recognition. The cracked cup glowed stronger inside the sand ring. For the first time since the wedding dragon broke, the warmth did not flicker away from Narella's thumbprint. Merixa's eyes brightened with fury. "A name will not restore the bond." "No," Narella said, "but without it, no restoration is clean." She turned toward the kiln shelves. There, behind the broken molds and false glaze bowls, sat a sealed clay jar painted with mourning lines. Narella had not placed it there. Her stomach tightened. Funeral clay. Not from the public stores. Market private. Market royal. She lifted it carefully. The jar was cold enough to burn. Orvian took one step. "What is that?" Narella read the mark under the mourning paint. The old royal seal of Kade, battle dead. Her mouth went dry. "This is not ordinary funeral clay," she said. "It came from a dragon, bond that died in war." Merixa's face changed too late. The jar cracked in Narella's hands. Cold ash seeped through the mourning lines and gathered into the shape of a broken wing. Across the testing slab, the gold coil bent toward it like a needle finding north. Narella understood. The dead heat was not only stolen from Orvian's cup, it had been mixed with the last cooling of a dead dragon bond to make the false marriage bond obey grief. The jar split open. Inside, stamped under the ash, was a name Orvian had not heard since Riss. Orvian Kade, his elder brother. The ashworks lost every thread of warmth at once. Orvian's dragon shadow bowed as if struck by a blade no one else could see. The cracked beast shape folded toward the broken clay jar, its damaged wing dragging across the ashworks wall, its horned head lowering until the white fracture in its chest glowed like a wound under moonstone. It did not bow to Merixa. It did not bow to Narella. It bowed to the name stamped beneath the funeral ash. Orvian Kade, the elder brother who should have taken the dragon throne. The prince whose death at Riss had turned Orvian from battle-scarred second son into king before the court had finished washing blood from its banners. Narella had been below the healing chambers that night, kneading clay until her wrists shook, making cup after cup because Orvian's fever rejected metal, glass, and flame. She had heard the palace above her mourning caravan. She had not known his funeral clay had ever passed through Kade ashworks. It should not have. Royal funeral clay was sealed after the final cooling of a dragon bond. It belonged in the mourning vault, untouched, unnamed outside rite, never mixed with living heat. Merixa stepped forward carefully, watching Orvian more than the ash. Caravan died to preserve the throne. His last bond heat was royal, sacred, stronger than common kiln warmth. Narella looked at her. Dead heat is not strength. It is inheritance. It is grief. The cold deepened. The old cup beside the testing slab flickered weakly. Narella's thumbprint still glowed near the rim, but the warmth bent toward the opened funeral jar, as if pulled by a tide. Orvian's hand closed around nothing. For once, he looked less like a king than a man hearing a dead voice through a wall. Merixa saw the opening and softened her face. Majesty, I did not profane your brother. I honored him. The court fears a marriage bond made only of bridal warmth. But a bond touched by Caravan's last heat would quiet every faction that still whispers your crown began in loss. There it was. Not confession. Justification. Political grief, polished until it looked like duty. Several older lords looked away too quickly. Narella saw them, men who had served Caravan first, men who had bowed to Orvian because there had been no living alternative, men who would prefer a bride able to wrap the new marriage in the dead prince's memory and call that stability. Orvian's dragon shadow trembled. The crack widened across its throat. Narella moved to the testing slab. Do not listen to her while the ash is pulling at your bond. Orvian's eyes shifted to her. Merixa's voice cut in. Now she commands your mourning too. No, Narella said. I am naming what you are using. She took a fresh strip of clay and pressed it gently to the outer rim of Caravan's funeral jar. The strip did not warm. It cooled, but evenly, respectfully, the way final clay should. Funeral clay cools what has ended, she said. Then she touched another strip to the grey ash Merixa had packed inside the wedding dragon. The strip caved inward. The hollow spread like hunger. Dead heat mixed with stolen living heat does not mourn, it devours. She placed a third strip between Orvian's old cup and the funeral jar. For one heartbeat, red gold warmth and pale cold met without violence. Then the gold coil hidden in the shattered, unfired dragon twitched. The strip cracked. Orvian flinched as if the crack had crossed his ribs. Narella turned to the court. This was not meant to bless a marriage. It was meant to make the king's dragon shadow answer grief before it answered choice. Merixa's lips parted. No answer came. That silence did more than denial would have. Orvian stepped toward the slab, but Narella lifted one hand. Not closer. He stopped. The court watched him obey the keyline woman. He felt their watching. Narella knew he did. His pride had not vanished. His training had not vanished. His crown still wanted him to take control of the room. But his dragon shadow was cracked. His brother's funeral clay lay open, and the woman he had called Keeper had just stopped his bond from stepping into a grief hook. He stayed where she told him. What happens if I finish the marriage rite? He asked. Merixa's face tightened. Narella looked at the gold coil. Your dragon shadow will join the bond through Caravan's dead heat. The court will say your brother blesses the marriage. And truth? Your shadow will keep searching for what it lost. Merixa's ring. Pressure will become the nearest answer. The words landed like iron. Merixa's hands curled. You make it sound monstrous. It is. I tried to give him peace. You tried to give his grief a leash with your name on it. Orvian's dragon shadow lifted its head with a silent snarl. This time, the sound did not come from the wall. It came from Orvian's chest. The court fell back. Merixa reached for the gold coil before anyone could stop her. She snatched it from the testing slab and drove her 7-point sun ring against the plate at its center. The coil flashed white. Cold ash rose behind her in the shape of a broken dragon wing. For one dizzying moment, the ashworks saw what she had meant to become. Not merely bride, not merely queen, but the woman standing between Orvian and Caravan's death, wearing stolen warmth as mercy. The cracked dragon shadow leaned toward her. Orvian staggered. Narella grabbed the maker's mark and slammed it flat against the testing slab. Name first, she said. The bronze mark burned red gold beneath her palm. The coil shrieked. Not like metal, like clay under sudden wrong heat. Merixa cried out and dropped it. The ashwing behind her broke apart, scattering cold across the floor. Narella did not let the moment pass. She took a shard from the shattered, unfired dragon, pressed her thumb to it, then pressed the warmed shard against the funeral jar's royal seal. The seal should have cooled. Instead, it smoked. Narella went still. True funeral clay did not smoke under Maker's heat. It rested. This clay had been disturbed before its cooling finished. She lifted the jar toward the dim kiln mouth, letting red gold light slide through the cracks. Inside the ash, beneath Caravan's stamped name, another impression appeared. Not a seal, a cut line, a harvesting mark. Orvian's voice was barely human. What does that mean? Narella looked at the dead ash, the stolen cup, the gold drawer binding, and Merixa's pale face. It means Caravan's bond heat was not taken from sealed funeral clay. The ashworks walls tightened with cold. Narella set the jar down before her hands could shake. It was taken before his dragon bond finished dying. The old kiln gave one low, furious breath. Across the cooled stone, heat gathered into words no priest dared read aloud. Orvian Kade was harvested before he was mourned. Orvian did not reach for his brother's funeral jar. That was the first wise thing he did after the ash named Orvian. His hand lifted once, stopped in the air, then closed into a fist at his side. The whole ashwork seemed to wait for him to make the old mistake. Touch grief because it was his. Claim it because he was king. Command it because pain felt less terrifying when dressed as authority. He did none of those things. Narella Cind stood between the testing slab and the open kiln, the cracked cup warm against her palm, the scraped maker's mark lying beside the jar that should have held only final cooling. The jar smoked under her heatprint, thin gray threads rising from the mourning lines. Funeral clay was not meant to smoke. It was meant to rest. Merixa Sol looked at the smoke with the expression of a woman watching a locked cabinet open in a room full of witnesses. Then she found her voice. This proves nothing except that old war rites were imperfect, she said. Riss was chaos. Men died faster than priests could seal them. You would turn a battlefield flaw into an accusation before the Dragon King. Narella touched the edge of the jar with the iron key. The smoke bent away from Merixa's voice. Not fear. Recognition. You knew it was not sealed, Narella said. Merixa's mouth tightened. One of the older lords stepped forward, face pale under his beard. Lord Asken, Narella thought, Caravan's former banner captain. He had not spoken once since the wedding dragons broke. Careful, Kiline, woman, he said. There are griefs beneath this throne you do not understand. Narella looked at him. Then they should not have been hidden inside marriage clay. The ashworks drew a breath of heat around her. Orvian's dragon shadow lifted its cracked head from the wall. The fracture at its throat still glowed, but the beast no longer leaned toward Merixa. It watched the jar now, wary and wounded. Test it, Orvian said. Merixa turned sharply. Majesty. Test it. His voice had no softness left. Narella set the cracked cup inside the ring of clean kiln sand, then placed 3 fresh clay strips in front of the funeral jar. She pressed the first strip gently to the jar's sealed edge, where Orvian's name had been stamped. The strip cooled, evenly, respectfully. This is mourning clay, she said. A finished bond cools without hunger. She pressed the second strip to the cut line beneath the seal. The clay jerked in her hand. A sharp white crack split it open, and from inside came a faint sound, like a wing beating once inside stone. Several nobles recoiled. Narella did not. This is a harvest cut, heat taken before the bond had finished dying. Orvian's face had turned bloodless. She touched the third strip to the gray ash packed inside the wedding dragon's false core. The strip blackened from within and folded inward as if swallowed. And this, she said, is what happens when unfinished death is mixed with stolen living heat. The cracked shadow behind Orvian shuddered so hard the wall lamps guttered cold. Lord Asken whispered, it was done to preserve the line. The court turned. Merixa closed her eyes for the space of a single breath, furious that someone else had broken before she chose to. Orvian moved one step toward Askan. What was done? The old lord looked at Caravan's jar, then at the floor. Your brother's dragon bond still held heat when he was brought from Riss. The healers said it would vanish with him. House Sol's ember priest said royal heat could steady the next bond if preserved. Orvian's voice dropped. My bond. No one answered. They did not need to. Narella understood the shape of it now. Caravan's unfinished death had been cut, stored, and hidden under mourning paint. Orvian's dragon fever after Riss had not been only battle sickness. His bond had been forced to survive near harvested grief, royal heat torn from a dying brother, and kept too close to living flesh. He had been fed warmth from her cup, because everything else around him had been poisoned by a dead prince's unfinished fire. Merixa stepped forward, seizing control before the old lord could say more. And he lived. The kingdom lived. Caravan's sacrifice did not end in mud and defeat. It strengthened the throne. Narella looked at the cracked strip still trembling in her fingers. Sacrifice is given. This was taken. Merixa's eyes flashed. What would an ashworks woman know about royal necessity? The same thing Clay knows, Narella said. Pressure leaves shape. The lines struck the room silent. Orvian turned toward Merixa. Your house kept the jar. My house protected what your court begged us to protect. And you used it for a wedding bond. I used what already bound you, she snapped. Then, realizing the words had gone too far, she lifted her chin and made them deliberate. Yes, your grief has ruled you for years. Your court fears it. Your dragon shadow carries it. I could have made it useful. The cracked shadow snarled. This time, sound came with it. Low, broken, alive. The ashworks shook. Priests reached for warding chains on instinct. Lord Asken's hand moved toward his sword. Two guards started toward Narella, as if the easiest answer to dangerous truth was still to seize the woman showing it. Orvian turned once. No hand touches the maker. The command stopped them, not because it was loud, because it was late, and he knew it, and the shame in it made the words heavier. Narella did not thank him. She lifted the cracked cup from the sand ring and held it near the funeral jar. The dead ash inside the jar leaned toward the cup with terrible hunger. The cup's old thumbprint answered with a weak red gold pulse. If this continues, she said, the dead heat will drink the cup dry. Then your dragon shadow will lose the one living warmth that taught it to survive Riss without obeying Caravan's stolen bond. Orvian swallowed once. What must be done? Separate the living heat from the harvested grief. How? Narella looked at the open kiln. The fire inside had not lit, but its black iron mouth glowed faintly around the edges. The cup must be refired. Merixa laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Refiring an old bond cup can break the heatprint completely. Yes. And if it breaks? Narella looked at Orvian. Then the last clean memory of your survival goes cold. The words hit him harder than any accusation. For the first time, fear crossed his face plainly. Not fear of death, fear of losing the one piece of warmth that had not lied to him after Riss. Merixa saw it and reached for him with her ash-marked hand. Majesty, do not let her risk it. I can stabilize the bond now. Caravan's heat answers royal blood. My ring can hold the draw until the rite is complete. The gold coil twitched on the slab. It bent toward Orvian. Narella stepped in front of it and brought the iron key down hard. The coil flattened. Cold ash burst from its center. Orvian's dragon shadow jerked free of Merixa's pull and collapsed back against the wall, panting without breath. Merixa's face broke into fury. You would rather destroy him than let me save him. No, Narella said. I would rather let him choose pain that is his than bind him to comfort with your name inside it. The kiln opened wider. Narella placed the cracked cup on the firing stone with both hands. Her thumbprint glowed once under her touch. Then the old cup began to shake. Across its cracked rim, red gold heat formed one final warning. If the cup is refired, the false bond will lose its first lie. Beneath it, another mark will surface. Narella did not put the cup into the kiln immediately. That frightened the court more than haste would have. She stood before the open black iron mouth with the cracked dragon bond cup in both hands, feeling the old thumbprint pulse under her skin. The cup had kept warm through fever, war, and royal forgetting. Now it trembled like a living thing asked to enter fire a second time. Refiring could save the heatprint. Orera Cind. Orvian Kade watched from the edge of the testing circle, one hand pressed to his chest where his dragon shadow cracked behind him. He had not moved closer since Narella told him not to. The restraint cost him. She saw it in the tendons of his throat, in the way his shadow's broken wing dragged whenever the dead ash breathed. Merixa Sol saw it too. "Majesty," she said softly. She hesitates because she knows the risk. If that cup fails, the last living heat that steadied your bond after Riss is gone. Narella looked at the cup, not at Merixa. The cup is already being drained. Because you exposed it. Because you opened a draw path to it. Merixa's face did not change. You cannot prove intent from craft scratches. "No," Narella said. "I can prove pressure." She turned to Orvian. "Before I refire it, the cup must be released." His brow tightened. "Released from what?" "Royal relic claim." A stir moved through the ashworks. The oldest priest made a low protest. "The first Dragon Bond cup is part of the king's survival record. It belongs to the crown reliquary." "No," Narella said. "It has been kept there, as if survival belonged to the crown alone. But the heatprint is Maker's work. If I refire it while it is claimed only as royal property, the kiln will read command before care." Orvian's chaza held hers. There was pain in it, also understanding. Late, but real. Merixa gave a small, elegant laugh. "So now she requires the king to surrender his own relic before she will help him breathe." Orvian did not look at her. "What words are needed?" Narella's thumb tightened around the cup. She had not expected him to ask properly. That did not soften the old wound. It only made the next cut possible. "Say the cup is not a palace object to be used without its maker named," she said. "Say the heatprint carried inside it belongs to the craft that made it." The court stiffened. Orvian's crown fire flickered low behind his shoulders. His dragon shadow lifted its cracked head. Then Dragon King Orvian Kade spoke before his priests, nobles, bride, guards, and the woman whose work he had once called Keeper's Fault. "The cup is not a palace object to be used without its maker named," he said. "The heatprint carried inside it belongs to the craft that made it. Narella Cind made it. Narella Cind may judge it." The kiln warmed. Not for him, for the correction. Narella placed the cup on the lower firing stone. The moment clay touched stone, the dead ash inside Karovan's funeral jar rose in a thin grey spiral and leaned toward it. The gold coil, flattened earlier by the iron key, jerked on the slab, trying to recover its shape. Merixa stepped back. Only one step. Enough. Narella saw it. The refiring began without flame. Red gold heat moved from the kiln bricks into the cup, slowly, carefully, like breath returning to a sleeping chest. The crack through Narella's old thumbprint glowed white at the edges. Orvian made himself remain still. His shadow did not. It bowed toward the cup, desperate for the warmth that had taught it to survive. "No," Narella said sharply. Orvian closed his eyes. The dragon shadow stopped. The court watched a king refuse the comfort his own bond begged for. Narella pressed the scraped bronze maker's mark against the kiln plate. "First layer," she said. The cup shuddered. Merixa's 7-point ring impression surfaced beneath the base and burned bright gold. It looked beautiful for one breath, noble and elegant, exactly the sort of mark a court would trust. Then it cracked black. "Stolen pressure," Narella said. The mark peeled away as ash. The gold coil on the slab snapped in two. Merixa's hand flew to her ring. For the first time, she looked less angry than afraid. Narella kept her eyes on the cup. Second layer. The crack through her thumbprint widened. Pain answered in her own thumb as if the old cup had reached back through time to the night she made it. She remembered kneading clay in the half-dark, hearing Orvian's dragon shadow beat against the healing chamber above, pressing her thumb to the rim and whispering no prayer, only instruction. "Hold warmth. Do not burn him. Hold." The cup glowed red gold, then grey, then red again. Beneath her thumbprint, another mark surfaced. Not Merixa's ring, not Narella's hand. A small sun cut into the clay before the cup had ever been fired, hidden under the rim where a drinker's lip would never see it. 7 rays, thinner than Merixa's ring, sharper, older. House Sol. Narella's breath went still. Merixa whispered, "No." It was the wrong word. Too personal. Too late. Orvian heard it. "What is that mark?" Narella did not answer at once. She used iron tongs to turn the cup toward the kiln light. The hidden sun mark had been pressed into the clay while it was still soft. Before Narella's final firing, before Orvian drank from it, before anyone knew whether he would live. She looked at Merixa. "Your house marked the cup before it entered his fever room." Merixa's face had gone pale. Lord Askin took one step backward. Narella saw that too. The kiln heat sharpened, and the cup revealed the old pressure around the sun mark. Not a blessing, not a prayer, but a draw, channel too fine for sight, carved to guide heat away from the thumbprint and toward any later ring that matched it. Narella understood the cruelty of it so completely that for a moment she could not speak. Her cup had worked, but it had worked while fighting a hidden theft already planted inside its clay. She had saved Orvian through sabotage. Orvian stared at the revealed mark as if the room had tilted under him. "The cup was prepared before I drank from it?" "Yes," Narella said. "Someone expected your survival to leave heat worth stealing." Merixa's eyes flashed back to life. Or someone feared the second son would die and tried anything to hold royal warmth. "Then why hide it?" Narella asked. No answer. The cup shook violently on the firing stone. The hidden Sol mark began to pull at Narella's thumbprint, trying to reopen the old draw path. Orvian's dragon shadow lunged forward by instinct, and the crack at its throat brightened. Narella reached into the kiln heat with her bare hand. Orvian stepped forward. "Narella, stay back." He stopped. She pressed her thumb over the old heat print inside the refiring glow. Agony burned up her hand. The cup remembered her. That was the only reason it did not break. Red gold heat surged against the hidden Sol mark, forcing it to the surface. The ashworks filled with the smell of rain striking hot stone. The dead ash in Caravan's jar shrieked without voice. Then the cup settled. The crack did not vanish, but it stopped growing. On its rim, Narella's thumbprint remained. Below it, exposed and blackened, the hidden sun mark no longer lay buried. The kiln gave one harsh breath. Across the firing stone, heat wrote what the refiring had proved. The false bond was planted before the cup saved him. The refired cup kept trembling after the hidden Sol mark surfaced. It did not fall. It did not heal. It stood on the lower firing stone with one crack through Narella's thumbprint and one blackened sun mark under the rim, holding 2 histories at once. The night it saved Orvian Kade, and the theft prepared before it ever touched his hands. No one in the ashworks moved. Even Merixa Sol had gone still. Not defeated. Calculating. Narella knew the difference. She withdrew her hand from the kiln heat slowly. Her thumb was red where the old heat print had answered her, but she did not close her fingers around the pain. The court had seen enough of hidden wounds turned into public convenience. Orvian's dragon shadow pressed against the wall behind him, cracked and shuddering. It stared at the cup as if it recognized both comfort and trap. "Can the Sol mark be burned out?" Orvian asked. Narella looked at the cup. "Not cleanly." Merixa breathed out, almost a laugh. "Then all this theater has proven only that the cup must remain intact. His bond needs it." "No," Narella said. "His bond remembers it. That is not the same." The words made Orvian flinch. She did not soften them. A remembered warmth could become a chain when someone else learned how to pull it. Narella lifted the iron key and touched it to the exposed sun mark. The mark hissed. Heat flared red gold around the rim, then bent inward, dragged through the hidden draw channel. The cup's old thumbprint dimmed. Orvian's shadow jerked. Merixa's 7-point ring glowed beneath her glove. There, Narella saw the connection complete itself. "The mark still answers her ring," she said. Every eye turned to Merixa's hand. Merixa did not remove the glove. A noble signet answers many ceremonial marks, not from inside a fever cup. Lord Askin whispered, House Sol made the fever vessels after Riss. Orvian turned his head slowly. The old lord bowed under the look. Only the blanks, Majesty. The ashworks shaped the final heat. It was war. We needed every hand. Narella stared at him. You brought me clay already marked. His silence was answer. The wound shifted inside her. For years she had believed the cup was one piece of work no one could take from her. Plain, true, made in crisis, carrying no court ornament. Now even that memory had been entered before she touched it, prepared for future theft by people who expected her labor to succeed and her name to remain low enough to harvest. Merixa spoke into the silence. You are alive because every house did what was necessary. Orvian's voice dropped. Necessary for whom? For the throne. For me? For both, if you had been wise enough to know they are not separate. His dragon shadow gave a broken snarl. The crack across its throat spread. Narella placed the iron key flat between the cup and Merixa. Do not answer her while the draw path is open. Orvian went still. Merixa's eyes flashed. You see? She commands even your grief now. She stands between you and the only relic that kept you whole. Narella turned the cup with iron tongs so the thumbprint faced Orvian. Look at it, she said. He did. Not as king. As the man he had been after Riss, fevered and half lost, hands shaking around clay because clay did not burn him when fire did. This cup helped you live, Narella said, but it cannot remain the path by which others enter your bond. His face tightened. What must happen? She had known the answer since the hidden mark surfaced. She hated it anyway. The cup must be broken. The ashworks erupted. Priests protested first. Then, nobles. Lord Askin cursed under his breath. Even Orvian's guards shifted, trained to protect royal relics from every threat except the truth that some relics had become weapons. Merixa stepped forward, eyes bright with triumph. There it is. The ashworks woman wants to destroy the king's survival relic. She would rather break his last clean memory than admit she cannot purify it. Narella held the iron tongs steady. I can purify clay. I cannot purify a lie hidden inside its first shaping without ending the vessel that carries it. Orvian looked at the cup. The old thumbprint glowed weakly. Then he looked at Narella. In his eyes, she saw fear. Not of losing authority. Not of looking foolish before court. A deeper fear that if the cup broke, the night he survived would become less real, and all that remained of Riss would be guilt, blood, and a brother's unfinished death. Narella's voice lowered. Breaking the cup does not erase that you lived. His jaw worked once. It may erase the last warmth I remember from that night. No, she said. It releases it from being used against you. Merixa raised her ringed hand. Majesty, refuse this. Command her to seal the crack and give the cup to me. I can hold the draw stable long enough for the wedding bond to complete. Your shadow will stop breaking. And after? Orvian asked. After, you will have a queen who can carry what she was trained to carry. A leash. A bond. A leash, he said again. Merixa's beauty hardened into hatred. Narella reached toward the cup. Orvian spoke before she touched it. Wait. The single word stopped the room. He stepped forward, but not into the testing circle. He stopped at its edge, where the kiln heat could judge his distance. Then Dragon King Orvian Kade removed the black battle ring from his right hand and set it on the stone floor. This relic was kept under crown claim, he said. I release that claim. The priest stared. His crown fire flickered. The cup does not belong to my throne. It belongs to the truth of the hands that made it and the life it preserved. If breaking it is the only way to free my bond from what was planted inside it, then it breaks by Maker's judgment. Narella's fingers tightened on the tongs. The kiln warmed, but she did not mistake it for forgiveness. This was not romance. This was consent given back to craft. She lifted the cup from the firing stone and placed it on the testing slab. Then she picked up the iron firing mallet. Merixa Lunget. Not for Orvian. For the cup, her ring struck the hidden sun mark before Narella could bring the mallet down. The cup screamed. A bright white crack burst through the ashworks, and Orvian's dragon shadow tore halfway from the wall, dragged toward Merixa's ring by the draw path inside the cup. Cold ash rose into the shape of Caravan's broken wing behind her. Orvian staggered, breath leaving him. Narella moved. She struck the cup. It shattered under the mallet. Red gold heat exploded outward, not as flame, but as thousands of tiny clay-bright sparks. The hidden soul mark burned black and vanished. The draw channel snapped. Merixa flew backward, her ring split in two across her finger. The cracked dragon shadow fell to its knees behind Orvian. For one terrible breath, it looked broken beyond repair. Then the red gold sparks did not go to Merixa. They did not go to the throne. They gathered around Narella's thumb. Every shard of the cup turned toward her hand. The kiln breathed once, deep and fierce. Across the shattered clay, the released heat formed a final truth. The king's dragon bond did not need the cup whole. It needed the maker named. The first shard rose from the testing slab and touched Narella's thumb. Not cutting, remembering. Red gold heat moved through the broken cup pieces in tiny pulses, each shard carrying one part of a night the court had tried to turn into property. The old cup was gone as a vessel. It could no longer be held in a reliquary, kissed by nobles, sealed under crown claim, or used by House Sol as a hidden path into Orvian's dragon bond. But its warmth had not died. It had returned to the hand that made it. Narella stood very still as every shard turned toward her palm. Her thumbprint glowed brighter than the marriage flame had all day. The heat did not flatter her. It did not crown her. It simply recognized the pressure that had held warmth when fire itself had failed. Behind Orvian Kade, his dragon shadow knelt on the ashworks wall. The cracked beast had fallen when the cup broke, one wing folded wrong, chest split with a white line from throat to heart. It no longer leaned toward Merixa's broken ring. It no longer bowed to Caravan's stolen funeral ash. It watched Narella's hand like something starved, seeing honest fire for the first time. Merixa Sol lay against the lower stone step, one hand clutched to her split signet. The 7-point sun ring had cracked through its ruby center. Cold ash leaked from the break in thin gray threads. "It is not over," she said. Her voice was scraped thin, but not empty. Narella looked at her. No, not empty. Merixa still had the most dangerous thing left to her, a story. "The cup is destroyed," Merixa said, pushing herself upright. "The marriage dragon is broken. The king's shadow kneels, and all because an ashworks woman demanded her name before his survival. Several nobles shifted. Even now, some wanted the old shape back. A guilty servant, a grieving king, a noble bride who made hard choices for political stability. Narella took one warm shard between two fingers and set it in the ring of clean kiln sand. "Say my name," she said. The court froze. Merixa smiled faintly. There it is. Narella did not look away from the old priest who had tried to hurry the repair. "Not as praise, as record." The priest swallowed. His eyes moved to Orvian. Orvian did not rescue him from the command. The priest bowed his head. Narella Cind made the first dragon bond cup after Riss. Another shard warmed. Narella placed it beside the first. "Say what it carried." The priest's voice trembled. "Living heatprint." Another shard glowed. "Say what it did." The ashworks went silent enough to hear the broken ring dripping cold ash. It held warmth when the king's dragon bond rejected flame. The third shard lit. Orvian's dragon shadow lifted its head. Narella turned to Lord Ascan. The old banner captain looked as if he had aged 10 years since the funeral jar opened. "Say what your houses hid." His mouth hardened. "I served Orvian Kade." "Then serve him truthfully." The words struck him deeper than accusation. Lord Ascan looked at the cracked mourning jar, then at Orvian. His voice came rough. Caravan's bond heat was harvested before mourning finished. how Sol's priests preserved it. Some of us allowed it because we feared the throne would not stand without the dead prince's strength. Cold moved through the room. Narella placed another shard in the sand. It warmed, but slowly. Mourning did not heal because someone confessed. It only stopped being used as a weapon. Orvian stepped forward to the edge of the testing circle. His face had the stillness of a man standing before a grave he had misunderstood for years. "Caravan was my brother," he said, "not my chain." The funeral jar gave a low crack, not breaking, loosening. Orvian continued, voice deepening until it filled the ashworks. "His death will not be used to bind my dragon shadow. His last heat will not be carried into my marriage rite, my throne rite, or any bond of mine. He will be mourned, not harvested." The white crack in his dragon shadow dimmed. Merixa's expression sharpened in panic. "You cannot discard royal heat that preserved your reign." "I am not discarding him." Orvian looked at Narella then, but he did not ask her to soften the words. "I am releasing what was taken from him." Narella nodded once. That was all. She took the shard nearest her thumbprint and pressed it gently to the mourning jar's cut line. The shard did not force heat into it. It only carried the named truth close enough for the clay to remember proper ending. The jar cooled. For the first time, it cooled cleanly. The grey ash inside settled, no longer leaning toward the wedding clay, no longer reaching for Orvian's shadow, no longer hungry for Narella's cup. Orvian Kade's name faded from a weapon into mourning. Merixa made a sound like a breath torn in half. The last draw thread inside her broken ring snapped. Her knees hit the ashworks floor. Without the ring pressure, without the hidden soul mark, without the whole cup to steal from, the false bond had nowhere left to go. Narella turned toward the final broken wedding dragon. Its hollow body lay in pieces beside the gold coil, pale clay dust mingled with dead ash. She lifted one shard from its chest and held it above the kiln mouth. "This clay cannot seal marriage," she said. The court listened now, not because it respected her yet, because the kiln did. It carried stolen heat, dead ash, false maker's mark, and bridal ring. Pressure. It is not to be repaired. It is to be named as failed work. The oldest priest whispered, "Failed work cannot remain in the marriage record. Then write a truthful record." Orvian's voice followed immediately. "Write it." The priest bowed. Narella placed the wedding shard into the kiln. Red gold heat passed over it once. The clay did not glow. It crumbled into clean dust. Not ash. Dust. The difference mattered. Dead ash devoured. Clean dust returned. Narella gathered the glowing cup shards into a shallow clay dish and pressed her thumb over them. They softened, not into a cup again, but into a small flat seal, rough-edged, plain, marked by the pressure of her hand. No royal crest, no soul sun, no priestly carving. A maker's witness. She set it on the stone between herself and Orvian. "This will not feed your bond," she said. "It will witness that it once needed help." Orvian looked at the seal, then at her. "And if my bond cracks again?" Narella held his gaze. "Then you ask for help before taking it." The words did not humiliate him. They should have. Instead, they steadied him. His dragon shadow rose slowly from the wall. The cracks remained, but they no longer spread. The broken wing unfolded enough to stand. Not whole, not cured. Alive without the false draw. Orvian bowed his head to the seal, then to Narella. The court watched a dragon king bow in the ashworks, not to a servant, not to a bride, to the maker whose name had been stolen from the heat that saved him. Merixa's voice came low from the floor. "You would build law around clay?" Narella looked down at her. "No, around what clay proved." Orvian turned to his priests and lords. "From this day, no dragon rite in Kade Ashworks will use anonymous sacred craft. Every bond cup, funeral wing, altar beast, and marriage dragon will name the maker whose heatprint it carries." The kiln warmed behind Narella. He continued, No royal object may be removed from the ashworks, reliquary, or mourning vault for private firing. No noble ring pressure may be placed inside bond clay. No marriage rite may be sealed by stolen heat. The words entered the ashworks like bricks set in mortar. Narella listened. She did not smile. Law was not affection, but it could make theft harder for the next woman whose work nobles wanted without her name. Orvian faced Merixa. Lady Merixa Sol is barred from Kade ashworks, from all dragon bond rites, and from the marriage flame. Merixa lifted her chin even then. And how Sol? Narella answered before Orvian could. Every soul vessel made after Riss must be tested. The court stiffened. Orvian looked at her. She did not lower her eyes. After a moment, he said, "So ordered." The Heatprint Kiln exhaled one long breath of red gold heat. Above them, far in the wedding hall, the cold marriage flame went out completely. No one panicked. It had been false. Then, from the ashworks' kiln mouth, a new ember rose. Small, unclaimed. Narella took a plain lump of fresh clay from the basin and pressed it between her palms. She did not shape a wedding dragon. Not yet. She shaped a simple scale, curved enough to rest over a crack. She held it toward Orvian. He did not reach too quickly. "May I?" he asked. The question moved through her more painfully than command would have. Narella placed the warm scale on the stone between them. "Not from my hand." He accepted that. He took the scale from the stone and pressed it to the cracked chest of his dragon shadow. The shadow bowed over it. Red gold heat spread through one fracture, closing nothing fully, but stopping the break from deepening. Orvian breathed as if he had been holding Riss inside his ribs for years. "Narella," he said quietly, "I cannot return what was taken. No, I cannot make memory into apology. No, I can name the maker before I ask the craft." She looked at him then, at the king who had given her kiln to his bride because he thought sacred work belonged to palace walls, at the man whose survival had carried her thumbprint while his court forgot her, at the dragon shadow still cracked, still alive, no longer bending toward stolen grief. "That," she said, "is where you begin." She turned back to the kiln. There would be new clay to prepare, old vessels to test, mourning jars to open, Sol marks to uncover, records to rewrite, and a kingdom to teach that heat was not decoration simply because women's hands carried it quietly. Behind her, Orvian did not follow too close. He waited at the edge of the ashworks circle until the kiln's heat allowed him another step. Narella lifted the maker's witness seal and pressed it into fresh clay. This time, her full name remained. Narella Cind. The new mark warmed red gold. Not beautiful, true. And for the first time since Riss, the Dragon King's shadow lowered its cracked head before the maker's name and did not break.